Instead of a quote to start the episode today, here's regular contributor Danielle McLaughlin reading the short poem Morning Swim by Maxime Cumin.
Into my empty head there come a cotton beach, a dock wherefrom I set out oily and nude through mist in chilly solitude. There was no line, no roof or floor to tell the water from the air. Night fog, thick as terry cloth, closed me in its fuzzy growth. I hung my bathrobe on 2 pegs. I took the lake between my legs, invaded an invader. I went overhand on the flat sky. Fish twitched beneath me, quick and tame. In their green zone they sang my name. And in the rhythm of the swim I hummed a 2/4 times slow hymn. I hummed Abide With Me. The beat rose in the fine thrash of my feet, rose in the bubbles I put out slantwise, trailing through my mouth. My bones drank water. Water fell through all my doors. I was the well that fed the lake, that met my sea in which I sang, Abide With Me.
This is AMI Audiobook Review. I'm your host, Jacob Szymanski, and you were listening to Danielle McLaughlin reading the poem Morning Swim by Maxime Cumin. Ramya Amathan is with me, and of course, Danielle McLaughlin herself. How's it going, guys?
Going well. What a poem. It really sets the tone for this conversation here.
Swimming. A great way to start a new year.
It made me feel cold and unequipped to understand what it was trying to say, because poems have never been my thing, and I never had the literary skill to fully comprehend what a poem is. But correct me if I'm wrong, Danielle. Is that kind of the point, that sometimes you really need to dig deep into a poem and it's up to interpretation?
It's always up to interpretation. I like to think of it a bit like swimming, actually, Jacob. It drops you in at the deep end. You know, there you are. There are a whole bunch of words, and you have to sort of kind of float your way through them to try to figure out what kind of image is presented to you, or what kind of image you yourself create in your mind. And you know, you said you felt cold and ill-equipped. I think a lot of people feel that when they head to open water too. So that's that may be the image that for you is the right one with this poem. For me, it feels like a sort of a welcome to the lake kind of feeling. You know, you just kind of step in and you think, oh, I think I'll spend the rest of my life in the water. You know,
it's interesting you say that, because I was thinking how I'm reading and hearing this poem feels very otherworldly. Like, wow, the water feels so unfamiliar to the everyday experience. Whereas for you, this poem probably feels like home.
It really does. I especially like the fish image. One time, numbers of years ago, I was swimming with my husband in Mexico. We were swimming over a coral reef. And I don't scuba dive, I just swim. And a very small striped fish seemed to notice that I was wearing a striped bathing suit. And it swam directly under me for like at least a half hour. It just kind of thought, it was so cute. And I thought, okay, I'm going to swim on my back and see if it goes away. Nope, it just came up. It came along with me. It just stayed with me. And I thought, I wonder if it thinks I'm its mom. You know?
Of course.
It was, and I just had that sense. Yes, that fish and I, we were having a good time.
You swam in a lot to places,
no,
right? Like not just in Lake Ontario.
If it's wet, I will swim in it. But speaking of Lake Ontario, my granddaughter, who's in her 20s, and I have a tradition, which is on New Year's Day, which is just past last week, we take a very cold plunge into Lake Ontario, and it's a lot of fun.
Does it constitute
we don't go with a group. We just do it ourselves, and any of our friends or family who will go with us. May I say, very few ever do.
That's even worse.
We just do it anyway.
You just go anyway. Wow.
So if the swimmers haven't figured it out already, Danielle is quite the avid swimmer. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. A pretty niche topic. This kind of started as like perhaps a discussion of niche books, but it branched out into, why don't we just dive super deep into swimming books? Yes, that's a thing. And
I
Danielle, you've
do.
got a bunch of
And
those for us
quite
today.
honestly, every now and then I do a library search to see if there's anything new in swimming books. But the books that I'm going to talk about today, only one of them is new-ish. Several of them are quite a bit older. The first is a short story I'd like to talk about, and some of your audience may have seen a film, an old film made in 1968 that was based on a short story by John Cheever. The short story is called The Swimmer, and it stars Burt Lancaster, and it is one of his most iconic roles. And the short story is kind of tragic, as is the film, but it basically is the story of a man who decides that he's going to go home from wherever he happens to be by swimming across everybody's swimming pool. And he lives in a part of the world where everybody has swimming pools. So he just goes through swimming pool after swimming pool after swimming pool. And you get this sense of him, wanting to be in the water, but wanting to get somewhere to be, long story short, you don't get very far if all you're doing is going through people's swimming pools. But that image of the swimmer as a kind of obsessive person is carried through most of the books that I'm going to talk about today. The first book that was lent to me by my next door neighbor, who saw me coming home dripping wet one summer's day and said, "Oh, I have I have a book I think you're going to like." And I'm showing it on the screen right now because after I had read it and loved it, my husband bought it for me. It's called Swell, and it's by Jenny Landreth. And the wonderful thing about this book, it is sadly it is not on Sela, but it is available on Audible, narrated by the author herself, who is hysterically funny. So I think that if if you're interested in a really fun read that looks at women's rights through the filter or through the lens of swimming, and it takes place in Great Britain largely. And what she does is she shows how ludicrous the rules about where women could and couldn't swim. I mean, they were going to pollute. They might pollute lakes and rivers, but they'd be okay in the ocean. And if you look at right? And then, of course, there were many pools. Once pools were being established for men, but women weren't allowed in. And then slowly they were allowed in an hour a week, and that sort of thing. Then they had to have separate pools for women because you never know about women. And, anyway, it's really, really funny. And she goes on to talk about women who've swum the English Channel. And it really looks at in depth at a lot of people, but it's just incredibly funny and so much fun. And the one thing that she talks about that I'd always had this fantasy that where I'd had friends who'd gone on sort of hiking holidays where you hike from one village to the next and a truck carries your stuff for you or something like that. And I thought, wouldn't it be lovely if you could actually swim from place to place? And then in her book, she talks about this thing called swim trek. And I thought, right, this exists. Yep.
What?
Nice.
I thought this was made for me.
Yep.
So last May, actually, my husband and I went on a swim trek in Turkey. And this was my inspiration. So this was the
inspiration behind that.
It was amazing.
Wicked.
So we actually swam from island to island, which is, short swims, nothing more than 1.5 kilometers at any given time.
Oh,
well,
still
these are,
sounds
according
dangerous.
to Swim Trek, these are called leisurely trips because the one,
the ocean.
This was
like
the
with
Aegean
big
Sea,
swells?
so it wasn't quite that bad, but the colors were brilliant, and you were actually going somewhere. You were using swimming as a method of transportation, which it is, of course, like walking, only wetter, and we just loved it to bits. It was the best thing. So, here it was so cool.
That's
I thought
so
I had
cool.
created this fantasy of something you could do. And it turns out, of course, like everything we dream, it actually exists in reality. Yeah.
Somebody's doing it.
Having read this book and then done this wonderful swim, people started hearing that I was obsessed with swimming and suggesting books. So the next, actually, I will backtrack. The book that I had read much earlier, many years ago, and have subsequently read again, is this one, and I'm holding it up to the camera right here, and it's now become a bit of a classic. It is called The Haunts of the Black Masseur, The Swimmer as Hero by Charles Sprawson. This one is available on Sela with human voice narration. And it looks at the swimmer in classical literature. So one of the things it talks about is swimming the Bosphorus, swimming the Dardanelles. These are things that people I swam with this last year have done themselves. And then Charles Sprawson, the author of this book, himself does these classical swims between Scylla and Charybdis, from sort of Trojan literature, really early literature, and he discusses. Yes.
Classical swims. Wait, do you mean books that were like swims that were referenced?
Yes, like
in
Lord
old
Byron,
books?
for example. Swam. Yes,
Whoa.
he swam the Hellespont,
wow.
and my husband and I, went and visited the Hellespont, kind of full of jellyfish when we were there, and didn't look very clean. But the people we were with assured us that one day a year they close all the shipping traffic, and this is a shipping lane, like really busy. They close it for one day, and people can swim from Asia to Europe. Can you imagine swimming from Asia to Europe? And it's about a 6-kilometer swim, but the current is so fast that people do it in like an hour or an hour and a half. Whereas,
So
let me think it's crazy.
No
I mean,
way.
yes,
It's like
exactly.
you're
Flying in the water.
Wow.
And I mean,
Do you really have to
don't
swim, or can
know,
you just
but
lay
I
there?
think because the current is so fast and somewhat erratic, you better swim. You may end up on the rocks, right? Yeah.
Okay, I guess you better know how to swim.
Yeah.
Can you feel
boy,
it? Can you feel the
ever.
current
Oh
pushing
yeah.
you?
I've
course.
been
Yeah.
a few times in my life in a riptide, which is a very strong current. And if you don't know what to do, you can panic. But if you're, say, on an ocean beach and you think you're going out for a little swim and you look up and you're a mile out, you might think, oh, now what am I supposed to do? Yeah, exactly.
happened?
But
Right.
there are two things. One is you swim it parallel to the shore, and you will find a place you can then approach the shore and get out. But the other thing that my husband and I discovered numbers of years ago is if you're taking a walk along the shore before you go swimming, and you notice that there are places where turtles lay their eggs, and if you're along many ocean beaches, you will notice that that's where you get out, because the turtle knows how to get out of a riptide. And so if the turtle can do it, you can do
Wild.
it. And so we've always, and often they're marked because they don't want people disturbing turtles. So there'll be a marking, and you can spot it from, well, not a whole mile out, but far out from shore, and you can say, oh, okay, I'm heading for that point.
But
Yes.
that's like the gap in
Danielle,
the tide.
what came first? The swimming addiction or these books that then fueled your
I
swimming
think they
addiction?
sort of grew in parallel. I've been swimming. I can't remember learning to swim, so I know I was around 2. And that's, may I say, well over 70 years ago. So I've been swimming rather a long time. And then, I found swimming in books and always really enjoyed it. But lately, in the past year or so, I've started purposefully looking for books about swimming. And so, The Haunts of the Black Masseur, which I'd read years and years ago, kind of recurred in my thought patterns. I thought, I'm going to read that again because I think I liked it. And I really did like it a lot. And then a friend of my husband's gave us this book, and I'm holding this up to the screen. And this one is called Waterlog, A Swimmer's Journey Through Britain by Roger Deacon. And it's bonkers. It's highly repetitive because when I say I will swim in anything that's wet, I have nothing on this guy. I mean, I think he swam in mud puddles. I mean, he logged a whole year of swimming in anything that he could possibly swim in throughout the British Isles, including in the coldest possible places in Scotland, the Irish Sea. He swims off the shore in Cornwall. Really dangerous places, places that are posted no swimming. I tend not to swim where people tell me I'm going to die, but not Roger Deacon. And he lives in a house, and he describes it, that is surrounded by a moat. Where he swims, I don't know exactly what that looks like, but he swims in his moat, having to sort of move aside not just dead plants but dead animals, and it's exactly. But that doesn't stop him, and he will go through underbrush to find a tiny stream, and somehow puts himself down into it to have a little swim, just below a car park or something like that. Things that are.
This man is sick. There's something wrong with this guy. Why is he doing that?
When you said mud puddles, I was like, is that even big enough? Like, what does swimming constitute?
Okay. So here is a definition I read recently of what is swimming. Not drowning.
Yeah, please.
Is that great?
That means I'm swimming right now.
It's deep enough.
Yes.
What is swimming? Mental health.
Yeah. So this guy, but I mean, some of his swims are spectacular, and he every now and then condescends to be accompanied by a boat or some other kind of craft to keep himself from being, killed by motorboats as they go out.
Because I feel like left to his own devices,
it's amazing he survived the year, but one of the things that has recently been developed, and I never heard about it when I was growing up, I don't think they had them, is something called a swim buoy. And basically it's like a balloon. It's inflatable, and it's on a strap that you fasten around your waist, and it floats along behind you. And it's also a dry bag, so you can put your valuables in it. You inflate it so it floats. It's in day glow colors, so it can be seen very easily from, if anybody's looking for your body, or if, or if there's a boat coming, somewhere near you, and you're basically wearing dark clothes and they can't see you, like a wetsuit, they can see this.
Right. Because when you're swimming in the water, the only thing that's really sticking out is your head.
Yeah. And if you're wearing a wetsuit, which is, they're almost always dark colors, that's not usually very visible. Yeah. And often swim caps also come in dark colors. So, yeah.
And if you're a good swimmer, you're not making any splashes.
Not a lot, unless you're being chased. But,
sorry, Danielle, was there another purpose for the buoy? Or I need a break, I'm just going to hug this for a bit?
It's not really a flotation device, but in a pinch, if you need a rest, you can kind of lean on it for a while. So, I mean, they're not big.
I was thinking hoisting myself right on top of it.
I don't think it would hold up your whole body, but I think you can.
Okay.
It's like the size of a soccer ball. It's not very big.
It's not round. It's sort of slightly long. It's maybe the length of your average laptop computer. So it's not really. Yeah, it's like 15 inches long. Yeah, it's not a real flotation device, but it's enough to keep, to keep you more visible, and so I think it's a great invention. Sure. My father, who was quite disabled on land, was a swimmer as well, and he used to scare us so much because he would go out into lakes if we had rented a cottage and just decide to swim, for an hour or so when there were motorboats and jet skis, and they hadn't invented these swim buoys yet. And we always thought he was going to be killed by somebody not seeing him in the water. And, but he just really enjoyed nothing more than, having the freedom of the mobility that water gave him when he didn't have that on land.
Well, okay, so you said that he was disabled on land, but that it didn't really apply that much in the water. What do you mean by that?
He wasn't fighting gravity, and that's one of the wonderful things about swimming. Is that it even if you aren't moving very quickly, you can still float. And he was exactly.
That's why it's so therapeutic.
All that stuff, it's great. And somebody who who needs assistive devices on land may not need them in the water. And I don't know if you watched the Paralympics, but my husband and I were completely focused on the aquatic events. And for example, there were a number of swimmers in the Paralympics who had no limbs at all, and yet were quite fast in the water because whereas
Sure.
on land these people would have more difficulty getting from place to place without assistive devices. In the water, rotation, just going back and forth, will actually move you ahead. And so there's one Turkish woman who's a brilliant swimmer who doesn't have limbs, but and you realize water is a different medium. Yeah. So
Yeah, of
I
course
kind
it
of
is.
honor it for that as well. I really love the idea that somebody who on land will have quite a bit of difficulty getting from point A to point B is probably faster than many of us once in the water.
Yeah.
And
And you get
Exactly.
to know your body differently.
it's a completely different medium
Yes.
of moving through than when you compare it to land. But as a form of exercise, another benefit of swimming is that it's way less
That's right.
difficult on your joints. Even just running, jogging is really tough
Yes.
on your knees and your hips over time. Swimming is very gentle. And it's kind of nice because it's also
Yeah.
cooling at the same time, right?
But you
might be
don't know
working up
it.
the sweat, but the water cools you down at the same
Yes.
time.
You don't
You don't
know.
even realize
I
it.
asked
Yeah.
my uncle was a physician, and I said, "Do you know whether people sweat while they're swimming? Because I can't tell." And he said the only way we would be
Yeah.
able to know is if weighing you before and afterwards, but you can't do anything else. In other words, no peeing in the pool. So,
Oh.
so I don't know whether you sweat or
Or the
not.
mud
I have a
puddle.
sense that if you're working hard, you probably do. And people have been known to lose weight while swimming, so maybe. But you're right, and I mean it's not great as a bone density exercise because you do need to sort of pound the pavement if you're going to work on bone density. But the thing about swimming is you can do it well into your 90s because it doesn't hurt your joints, and if you're doing it right, you just
Exactly.
keep on swimming.
Yeah. My grandpa,
It's the
who's
only-
92, still
Oh,
swims
that's
in the
wonderful. Good for
Wow.
him.
Yeah.
Well, I have a people that I see regularly at a pool where I like to swim in the wintertime. And one woman said, I'm doing this because I expect to be doing this well into my 90s. I don't want to stop. And I thought, good on you. Let's just, whatever the problem is, keep swimming. Just keep swimming.
Just keep swimming. So, what other books have been your top
Okay.
for literature?
There is a
swimmers?
book called Why We Swim by Bonnie Tsui, and it was written in 2020. It is on Sila, unfortunately, synthetic voiced narration, but available in other formats. And it's a lovely, not terribly long book that includes a bunch of anecdotes about various swimmers. She herself is a swimmer. She's written for the New Yorker and a bunch of other places. So she's quite a good writer. One of the stories that she tells early on in this book is one that absolutely captivated me. A story of a very sad story of a shipwreck off the coast of Iceland, and all the crew were drowned except one man. And this one man, in the incredibly cold water, swam 6 miles to the shore, hoping that he would be able to get help. He landed at a place where he couldn't get onto the beach because the rocks were so jagged and it was at the bottom of a cliff. So he had to swim an additional mile in order to actually, get out of the water. And this was, in winter.
Right.
He got out of the water and he was terribly thirsty. He went somewhere he could get a drink of water. The thing that they found was that he did not suffer hypothermia. I mean, the rest of the people died from hypothermia. So they brought him to hospital. He was really, not, other than having cut up feet, wasn't much the worse for wear. And they discovered that he had sort of an adipose layer. He was a big, big man of what they call brown fat. And most of us have both brown fat and white fat. But seals have the largest amount of brown fat, and so does this man, and it kept him from dying. And so, to honor him, it's very unusual.
Whoa.
He's very famous in Iceland, and because of him, children now all have to take swimming lessons. They have to pass swimming lessons in order to get out of school. He started swimming schools. People know who he is. And he also has been advocating for all fishing boats to have automatically deployable lifeboats. One of the reasons that everybody else drowned was they were trying to get the lifeboats deployed, but their fingers were frozen and they couldn't do it. And so it was horrible.
Not helpful.
But he's one of the people that she writes about in this book, Why We Swim. She's also swum from Alcatraz to under the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Do you remember when they used to say that no one could escape from Alcatraz because you die swimming? Now.
And then some swimmers went,
that's right.
I feel like I can swim.
And in fact, there is now a regular Alcatraz to San Francisco swim that many people do. So,
Wow.
Exactly.
As if to spit on that claim.
Yes.
We'll do it yearly.
That's right.
So those were both stories that came out of this book,
yes.
Why We Swim by Bonnie Sui.
Yeah, and I recommend that book as just it's entertaining and it's thoughtful. It's philosophical as well as to help explain why nut bars like me want to be in the water all the time. And I guess the last book I will mention, because somebody said it has a lot about swimming, is a long book called The Philosopher's Pupil by Iris Murdoch, written in 1983, and it's available on Sela with human voiced narration, and it's a novel, and it's a long and involved story. But the swimming part that I found interesting is it takes place in England in a spa town, where everybody learns to swim more or less at birth, and that the expectation is that you don't make it through life unless you can swim. And swimming figures in this novel from chapter to chapter. It goes on too long. Yeah, Iris Murdoch, who everybody honors greatly, could have used a little more editing here. I think it's a bit too long. But nonetheless, if you're an Iris Murdoch fan, you will like this book.
Also, shout out because there's a lot of swimming in it.
Yeah. And, as I say, if it's wet, I'm going to like it.
It's interesting because, of course, this entire time we've been hearing about your love of swimming and all these authors and their journeys of swimming as well. But there are a lot of people who are just absolutely frightened, terrified of water. And I've watched way too many I Survived episodes where I'm just like, the ocean is a wild
it's
place.
Scary. And you have to really, really respect the ocean because it does unexpected things. And, anybody who's seen, video of tsunamis or heard stories about, what can happen if you're caught in a riptide and don't know what to do, or, a sudden huge swell. Yeah, you have to know what you're doing and you have to know where you are. And swimming alone isn't too smart. It's not a good idea. I've done it fairly often myself, but only under very measured, circumstances. And I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge nonfiction reader, but one thing I will always give nonfiction shout outs to is for being an incredible way of immersing yourself in a topic in a way that's very complete in start to finish. Because you can go and look up a topic like, I don't know, beekeeping. Mm-hmm. But you're only going to see snippets of it per video, or if somebody does release a YouTube tutorial or something, it's only going to be one part. You need to watch the whole thing. But if you read a book, you're not going to publish a book that's unfinished. It's going to be polished start to finish, and all the words are weighed in a way that makes it easier to understand. It's just the best way to immerse yourself. So if you want to pick up a book about beekeeping, you can pick up something like The Backyard Beekeeper by Kim Flodham. I just looked that up just for an example. But
nice.
I also want to shout out Danielle McLaughlin. Thank you so much for coming on and swimming through our
Oh,
show
rip.
really quickly.
Oh, wow.
So when I heard you wanted to talk about this, I was like, that is so weird. Yes, please. That sounds awesome.
Thank you so much for giving me this wonderful opportunity. And I'm back in the pool tomorrow.
Nice.
Your passion is infectious, I have
Great.
to say. Now I want to go
Please
for a
do.
swim.
Yeah.
But only in like a pool with chlorine and warm water.
Rams is still unconvinced. She's like, yeah, nope.
And in the shallow end. Yeah. Did I say
In the
that
shower.
already? Okay.
I'll stick to showers. Thank you. All right, that was Danielle McLaughlin. She's a regular contributor on our show, and Ramya Amithin. She's my co-host. That's it for today's AMI audiobook review. You can find this wherever you listen to podcasts as well. We're on YouTube. You can subscribe to that YouTube channel and comment on our videos. It's really helpful. And also make sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time. I'm Jacob Szymanski.